being able to connect to a person one-to-one and make sure that I'm being understood and that I understand them and that sort of thing. So if I say anything that's, it makes you feel any kind of way, good or bad, I'd love to talk to you about it at some point, just one-to-one. Um, Try really hard not to be too nervous. But Bo asked me to come and share my story, whatever that means. And I'm happy to do it. He's done a lot of favors for me, been the one man show before. And so I thought I could give it a shot. I'm also actually looking at becoming a chaplain soon. In July, I'm going to be doing some training. And so I think this is something I should probably get used to. Um, but I thought I could give you guys a little bit of my background, since I've been leading worship here for a couple months and I don't think I've gotten to talk to everybody and really introduce myself. I could kind of let you know what I've come from and kind of where I'm at these days as far as Christianity is concerned and sort of maybe give some perspective that can enhance your walk, you know. So yeah, my name's John Wright. I've been here in Columbus for like a decade. My wife, Kristen, is here. I'm really happy she's here today. And actually, kind of cool, she's just taken a job in Alaska. She's going to be leaving a week from now. So this is our last full Sunday together for like 5 months. It's going to be pretty awesome. We're looking forward to it though. Um, so yeah, I grew up in McCalla, Alabama. I grew up Southern Baptist, and I think that definitely shaped a lot of my relationship to Christianity, a lot of my understanding of spirituality, in ways that I'm still learning to kind of unpack and separate from what I think is the real thing. Not to say that the truth is definitely there in that denomination, just like I think it's in many other denominations. It's just the way that they choose to approach it can really really leave a mark on somebody. Um, so one of the things that I noticed right out the gate was that there was all of this intense energy about going to church. We had to go to church. It was something we were supposed to do. My mom was the one that definitely felt that way more than dad. He was happy to stay home and watch Xena on TV instead. But he was a believer. He just didn't feel that burning pressure to go be a part of the congregation like she did. And I knew that if we slept in long enough on Sunday, we wouldn't have to go, which was great. But that mom would be guilty all day. She would just be upset. It'd be her fault. She's a bad mom for not taking us to church, and dad's a bad dad for not helping her be a better mom. And that was the energy. And I think all of those factors definitely play a role in my own understanding or in how I held Christianity coming up, because I stayed a very devout believer for all the way through high school and most of college until I started to kind of, take things apart a little bit. But I didn't realize that they had inadvertently trained me to defend it as the only way to look at it. Like all of these different denominations are all looking at Jesus Christ as the answer. But the way that we're approaching it, the rituals that we have, the sort of prayers that we pray, these are the right ways to go about it. Don't trust anybody else. And that was sometimes explicit, usually not, but that was definitely the energy, and I'm finding that's true in so many other people's backgrounds as well. Um, and so it wasn't until college that I was able to start, comparing notes with other people and saying, well, I think you and I are on the same team, but it doesn't sound like it. What's going on here? Um, so, one of the things I didn't realize until I was trying, man, you can ask my wife. I spent a couple days putting together several different like bullet lists of like, so I don't get lost in the weeds. Because the way that I'm wired, the way that God made me, I really like to analyze things. I like to pick them apart and see them from different angles, and I can get lost in the weeds here talking to you all today, and I'm going to try not to do that. But looking over my own life and looking at some of what was going on, my relationship to music has always been somewhat directly related to my relationship to spirituality, not church, but spirituality. So one of the good things that came from that Southern Baptist church was I joined the worship team and I started playing bass guitar, which actually tells you a little bit about my personality. I want to be on stage, but I want to be behind the guy singing, and I don't want you to look me in the eye. I just want to do it and then be told I did a good job. Um, so this is really hard for me. I'm really happy to be doing it. Thanks for being patient. Um, so that was, Alabama, and then I came to college and originally was going to be a psychology professor, and I figured out pretty quickly that at least the professors that I had, they were kind of on an ego trip. really lording their information over everybody. They weren't really being helpful or giving much insight as far as I could tell. So I dropped that pretty quick and went to music therapy, thinking that I could, pull on. I had been in marching band and stuff like that in high school, and was pretty good with music theory. And I thought, well, I can kind of marry the two. And I didn't realize music therapy. Are any of you familiar with music therapy? Have you heard of it before? I hadn't heard of it until college, and it should be a much more popular field, but I didn't realize how service oriented it was. And I think at that point in my life, I wasn't confident enough in myself and in what God has given me to work with. I, I think, relating it back to that Baptist upbringing, I was convinced that I was broken, I was wrong, I didn't have any right answers. So how could I possibly help somebody else through any situation if I don't know what's going on with me? Um, and so that didn't last long either. Those were both about a semester each of psychology, music therapy, and then I landed very quickly in music education because I don't know why it is, but teaching seems to be plan C for a lot of people. It should be, it takes a lot more than that. But becoming a music major was interesting because they forced me to choose between voice and piano. At other colleges, you get to pick other instruments to focus with, and at the W, they only had those two programs. And I was like, being the bass player, wanting to hide behind my instrument, I was like, oh, I'll do piano. That's fine. They said, well, have you ever had a piano lesson before? I said, no, absolutely not. And they said, well, you're going to sing. I was like, but I've never sung before. They're like, it's easy. You'll figure it out. And I'm 20 years old. I didn't even sing in the shower. Didn't sing with the radio. Nothing. And I think when I look at that moment in my life, that has to be one of the most contained examples of God showing me that I have to trust in something else. I have to believe that I don't know what's coming next. I'm trying too hard to make my reality match some idea of the future and not letting it be what it actually is, because it turns out I have this beautiful voice in me that was just there. I didn't make it, I didn't ask for it, but it was already in there. And I think that's pretty comparable to a lot of the gospel. A lot of the beauty and freedom in what Jesus shared with us is this idea that our salvation, our freedom, our connection to God is already in us. We just have to take the time and effort to kind of work it to the surface and cultivate it. So I started singing, and within a couple years, I'm singing, full arias and operatic, wild academic music stuff. And still, I don't like being on stage. I don't like doing it. It feels too vulnerable. It makes me, I always second guess it. I always get off stage and immediately ask somebody like, how was it? Was it okay? And that's just part of the way that I am. But that was one of the most meaningful things that happened to me in college. Something else that happened was I'd found authors that were willing to take scientific ideas and relate them to spirituality in a way that married the two and didn't create, didn't prop them up as enemies of each other. And I remember being bothered as a kid in that same Baptist church when the Big Bang Theory came to light. And I remember there was like a sermon against the Big Bang Theory. And I remember being very frustrated because as far as I could tell, even as a teenager, like that's just a different description of the exact same thing in Genesis. Because it's like, I don't read Hebrew, but I feel like this isn't a literal depiction of what happened so much as it is an impression of the beginning. And this is another impression of the beginning. And so I found authors in college that were willing to bridge those gaps for me and do the research here and the research there and say, like, they are saying the same thing. And I think that's the foundation for so much of wisdom, is to be able to stop trying to put things in one camp or another and see where everything's connected. That's where a lot of healing comes from. So yeah, all of that was my college experience. I graduated with a degree in music education and was kind of pressured into taking a job at Columbus Air Force Base. At this point, I was still a Christian, even more so because I'd found authors that weren't, doubting science and trying to make enemies of everybody else. But I still didn't feel like I was confident that I was right. Or if I did think I was right, I thought everybody else was wrong. And so I didn't want to be in church. I didn't want to try to participate there because I felt like there was all this hypocrisy. But I was kind of forced into taking this job as a worship leader because it was directly applicable to my degree and my lifestyle and things like that. And I didn't want it. And it took probably 3 or 4 years before I finally accepted that I had the job and was doing it whether or not I wanted to be there. And I'm grateful I did. I think it's been 8 years, and the growth that I've seen in my own life, my ability to coexist with other people who think very differently than me, and not judge them for it. I think a lot of that came from being in that space. Um, Another thing that really amplified my spiritual growth was meeting my wife Kristen, and I didn't want to embarrass her too much because I hoped she was going to be here today. But she has a very different approach to existing than I do. If you can't tell, I'm pretty contained. The fact that I'm in front of people makes me want to kind of hide and like tuck it all in and get it right before I share it. And she's the kind of person that can be very much more in the present moment. Just roll with what seems right at the moment, and it's a beautiful thing. It can be devastating to somebody who doesn't feel like they have all the answers together, but because she wasn't willing to kind of play with me on this rhetorical Christian level where I was, listing off these Bible verses or these ideas that I'd been programmed to recite to people, um, it kind of forced me to put them down and find other ways to talk about the same thing, which ended up being one of the most freeing things in my life, because you can connect with so many more people about the truth if you're not trying to make it sound just this way, or just like you were told to say it. It's a really beautiful thing. Um, because the whole time that we were together, she's got a very strong spiritual presence. She's a hiker. She likes to go out into nature, and I'm one of those people that can sit behind a computer for days and days and days. And it wasn't until I was able to go out into nature with her and see her in that space that I realized that that's where she's worshiping. She is present with God in that place in a way that I only am in my head. I only think that I can be that, but she's doing it. So much of us choosing to stay together despite a lot of our differences has helped us both grow exponentially as spiritual beings. Like, it's really incredible. We talk about Jesus way more now than we did when we first got together, because it doesn't have to sound just so. Now we're talking about the essence and truth of it, and not the dogma or the practice thing. So that kind of gets me to now, and I was kind of afraid of this. I knew I'm just kind of rambling. I'm all over the place, but I hope I'm making some sense to somebody. When I look back at my life and a lot of the situations I've been through, I've had a really good life. It's been very easy, honestly. Um, but my biggest enemy through all of it was my sense of self. I felt that I wasn't good enough. I felt that I was separate from God. I felt that I was, not equipped to do things. And so I removed myself from play. I didn't engage with people. I stayed home. I, found communities online and things like that, just stuff to plug into that was isolated and gave me a lot more control over my environment. And what I see when I look back is that all of the meaningful moments of growth and development were when I chose to show up anyway, when I chose to be present, when I chose to come and play, even when I didn't feel like I knew the rules yet, even when I didn't feel like I had the answers, which is what led me to come and start leading worship here. Bo asked me if I would do it, and I wanted to say no because I have a church service right before this, and I was like, that's just a lot of stress. I'd rather go home and take a nap or something. But something right away was like, no, you should do this. It'll be good. It's going to be good for you. It's going to be good for the people that you get to interact with, and it's just, the next chapter. Just do it. And so I did, and I haven't regretted it once. I've been so happy to be a part of this community. It's so small and so personal, and I feel like, I can't imagine another place I would do this for the first time, try to talk to people in this way. So I'm really grateful for it. I've been looking forward to it for years. I kind of wanted to stop leading worship at the Air Force Base so that I could come here and play with Bo, because I know he was leading for a while. Or actually, I wanted to play with Hayden when he was still the worship leader years ago. But I'm really grateful for this church and for the chance to be a part of it. I'm hoping to be even more active in the community. Especially as Kristen's gone for several months, I need something good to put my energy into. So one of the things that Bo and I really have in common is that when we get together, and it's just he and I specifically, because I think we've all experienced this with different people, there's just different flows, there's different communications that kind of come up, and it's just easier or more different or difficult with other people. And something about when it's just Bo and I, we can really plug into truth, and we can just start talking about it, and just sharing notes on existence and God, and I've read this, or I've experienced this, or that happens when you do this, and it all lines up, and it all gives us a fuller picture of what's going on here, and we always come away feeling refreshed and ready to go interact with the world. I think he's mentioned a couple of times an author named Richard Rohr, a very meaningful author to me, a very actually controversial author in Christian circles, because he's actively taking a lot of these elements of truth and kind of stripping away the dogmatic layers and just letting it be the truth thing. And I think that makes some people uncomfortable because of those upbringings. Um, but one of the things he talks about is contemplative Christianity, and this really resonates with my own experience. It's this idea that in the West specifically, our version of Christianity is very head-based. It's very knowledge-oriented. It's about knowing the right prayers, having the right words, saying the right thing at the right time, and holding the right words in your head. And it's not so much about unpacking those words or using any kind of poetic lens to analyze those things and really let them resonate with your life. Um, I would say to summarize the difference between contemplative Christianity and a lot of modern rhetorical Christianity, contemplative Christianity seems to be much more oriented with the heart than the head. It's about tuning into the fact that you're here, that your heart is beating, that your lungs are breathing, and that you didn't choose for any of that to happen. It's just happening. And that's your gateway to appreciating and understanding God's presence in your life. It's about learning how to be quiet and appreciate things as they are instead of projecting your own understanding onto a situation all the time. It's an experiential kind of worship, an experiential kind of relationship with God. The kind of thing we talk about in church all the time, or at least that was my experience. They talk about your walk with Christ, your walk with Jesus. We sing all these songs about how Jesus is the answer, but I very rarely remember hearing anybody give me any practical ways to do that. What do I do to be present with Christ, So I have I think three kinds of ways that I'm trying to practice that in my life today, that seem to be making a difference, and so I'll share those in a little while. But what it reminds me of is in Matthew 13:44 is the parable of the treasure buried in a field. So the verse for ESV says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. Then in his joy goes and sells all that he has and buys that field." And that verse stuck out to me when I was a kid, because I was like, why did he bury it again? Like, why did he cover it and run away and then come back? And I've sat with it for a long time, and I think it represents contemplative Christianity. I think it represents, like I said, me discovering that I had a voice to sing, and feeling that, well, this isn't mine. I didn't choose for it to be here. It's a part of what I was given, so I need to do something with it. I think this verse represents sort of the mystic or contemplative experience of learning to be present with God, where it's buried already inside you, but inside your life and your circumstances. It's already there. It's just under the surface. And all you have to do is kind of dig away at the stuff you don't need. And even, once you find that thing that's worth holding on to, you can sell the rest of it. You can get rid of everything else, because this is the only part that's real. The part of you that's here in this present moment right now that God's actively giving you. That's the connection. That's where the source is coming from. So if we can train ourselves to focus on that, to bring our attention to that often, we have a much better chance of being available to what God wants us to do in any given moment. And I think one of the things that a place that we get hung up in modern Christianity is we hold Jesus out here and we say, that's the answer. I'm just going to treat that as the answer, and I'm going to keep it at a distance. I'm broken. Jesus has to fix me. And that's one layer of it. But there's another layer where you see that Jesus is this perfect template for how we can be while we're here. He's this contained example of a being who celebrated with his friends and ate and drank and was merry while that was appropriate, and then would take time to go and pray and isolate himself and try to make sure he wasn't holding on to anything that wasn't helpful. And then he would eventually embrace his own death and realize that that's just a part of the cycle. It's unpleasant, and he even admitted out loud, if this could be somebody else's problem, I would really love that, but I understand that that's probably not how it's going to go, so it's okay. And I think that's one of the most freeing parts of the entire gospel, is for us as humans, as what we are, to accept that we're gonna die. The part of us that doesn't want to die is the part that has to. The part of us that can even tell it's temporary to begin with is the one that wants to be eternal. So if we take Jesus' example on that level, it's about embracing the fact that you're a temporary part of this ongoing life cycle, and that you don't have to be afraid of that part. You don't have to spend all of your life energy trying to avoid that part that's going to happen anyway. If you learn to embrace it and make it a part of your daily awareness, you can accomplish so much more for community and for kingdom than you would otherwise. So that's one of the most meaningful things that I've taken away from it. But as far as putting all of that into practice, tangible, practical ways of applying this truth to our lives, not just holding it at a distance and saying, I have the answer, but applying it. I think it comes down to contemplative prayer. It comes down to community service and then fellowship. So, especially in the West, the way that we've been taught to pray is with words. You know, we all know the Lord's Prayer, and we use it when we don't know what else to pray. We all rely on having those words. But leading up to, so I'm getting ahead of myself. This is the part I was afraid of, where I get lost in it. But I think the original function of prayer was supposed to be a lot more like meditation, which I know makes a lot of people nervous because it sounds like it comes from another spirituality. But I think ultimately, you know, Christianity did start in the East. It is a connection to that beingness that we've kind of lost in the West. We live in our heads so much that we don't know how to be quiet and just be okay with being alive in this moment. We have to fill that silence with something. And I think that if we could practice using prayer time as a time to be silent and empty ourselves of our thoughts, of our worries, stop trying to live in the future and pray for things that you want to happen or don't want to happen, and stop living in the past and asking for forgiveness and for all these things from stuff that's already done with, but just learn how to be right here, right now, and appreciate this present moment as the gift that it is. I think that's where you allow God to literally inform you. It's not about hearing words or being given a direct message about where to go next. It's about practicing making yourself available to God's presence in this very moment. Because if you practice that on your own, in private, then when you're in public and somebody needs something, you're not going to get hung up on, like, well, what if this happens, or what if that happens, or I'm not worthy, or whatever. If you've practiced emptying out and just being present to God, you'll see there's a need here, and I have a capability to help. You know, that's the real tangible practice of prayer, I think, which leads to service. I think that something that we get hung up with is this. It's like a scarcity mentality. We're afraid that if we give something away, we're not going to get it back. You know, we're not going to have enough. And just like the energy that's flowing through you right now that allows your heart to beat and your breath, your lungs to draw breath, you're not doing anything to receive that. It's just being given. It's coming whether you want it or not. And so the illusion is that we convince ourselves we have to hold on to these things. We have to tighten up on it. And that actually kills a thing. When you make it stop moving, it dies. So you have to learn how to let this stuff flow through you. And if you allow the energy from the Creator to come through you in a given moment, if you give freely of your love, of your energy, of your awareness, of your money, whatever it is, if you give it freely, then God moves through you and enriches your life and the life that you're touching. And you may never see a return from that person, and I feel like we get hung up there. Our egos want to be validated by the person. We want to hear thank you, for what we've just done. We want an immediate gratification. But what we don't realize is that when we're making ourselves available to that life source anyways, and we just let it flow through us, we're getting benefits and enrichments that we can't even comprehend. It's happening on parts of our being that we just don't understand. We're looking in the wrong places for those returns. So if we can practice giving freely without thinking about it, I think we'll see an overall increase in our livelihood, in our happiness. So in Matthew 6:3-4, he talks about this and says, "But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." That's just a practical way to practice that. Don't think about it. Don't question it. Don't look at how much money you have left in your wallet. Just give to those who need it. And that's true of your love and of your service, of anything. Just give it. And then in the following verses, he actually addresses the prayer, contemplative prayer, and says that, so that your giving may be in secret, then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And then in the next verses, in 5 through 8, it says, "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him." I think those two verses, not those two verses, but Matthew 6, 3 through 8, is some of the most practical wisdom of how to inform your daily practice, your daily interaction with God and with other people, so that you can become more and more Christ-like. Because it's like he just said so well, it's not about what you're saying, it's not about your requests to God. You can do that, and it can be helpful sometimes, but the function of prayer, the function of giving, is to be free, is to recognize that you're not doing anything to deserve any of this, and if you give it freely, like you're receiving it freely, then you're even more a part of it than you thought. And all of that together leads to fellowship. It leads to groups like this, where we can be honest about our interpretations of these scriptures and of our own existences, and we can share all of this, and it's heaven on earth for the time that we're here. And that's the goal, is to take these things and put them into tangible practice, not hold it at a distance, not say, Jesus is the doorway, but step through the door, apply his messages, apply his examples to your daily practice of life, and watch as your life becomes something you never would have imagined, and so much more beautiful. And part of that, and see, I get excited and then I get lost, but we're really bad at accepting suffering. And I know this is kind of a downer to kind of end it on, but suffering and pain, the unpleasant, are such a natural part of what this is and why we're here. Jesus had to accept it. We all have to accept it. And if we accept it, it'll liberate us. We're no longer afraid of it. We're not hiding from it. We're not doing things to stuff it down and avoid it. We're being present here with what this is and how it is. And that's, I think, the point, is to be here with each other for all that it is. So I'm going to pray and I'm going to dismiss this. I'm not, like I said, I'm not very charismatic. I have no idea how to make it feel like I put a nice little bow on everything. I'll get there one day maybe, but for now, just take a moment and bow your heads. Father, we are grateful for your presence here. We're grateful for the gift of life that you continue to give us every moment of every day, as long as you give it to us. I pray that you would help us to open ourselves to an appreciation of that gift. And I pray that you would help us to practice applying that gift in meaningful ways in our daily lives. I pray that you would help us to stop becoming afraid of the inevitable. I pray that you would help us to be free from all of those burdens that we hold on ourselves, and that you would show us again and again and again how to put it down and how to be here and how to play and how to be present. I'm grateful for every heart in this room, Lord. I'm grateful for the time that we get to share together. I'm grateful for this beautiful, warm Sunday afternoon in Mississippi. And I pray that we will spend the rest of today reflecting on the beauty of the gift that you continue to give us. In your Son's name, amen.